Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum everyone. This is lecture number 48 of this course, and today's topic is how to enable and disable interrupts. So let's see what we have in this topic to understand. Okay, to understand overall interrupts mechanism, we need to understand this chart. This chart is taken from your textbook, uh, and this chart summarize all specific interrupts which may appear, and there are some other interrupts other than these interrupts which are mentioned in this chart, but these are the main interrupts. So let's focus and let's understand what this chart is explaining us. So first of all, if you closely monitor, these are just nothing but the diagram drawn with the help of logical gates, and here we see two OR gates and two AND gates. So this one is basically AND gate, this is another AND gate, and if you are closely observing the shape of this gate, this is an OR gate and this is also an OR gate. And what are these input? These are different, these inputs are different possible interrupts, like for example timer 1 interrupt, timer 2 interrupt. We have been studying timers in this course, and we have introduced our students with timer 0, but we know that there are number of timers present in the pic18f microcontroller. So timer 1 interrupt flag and timer 2 interrupt flag, both of these are basically input to this OR gate. Furthermore, transmission and reception and the serial port communication, we have observed these flags. So these are the also inputs of this logical gate, and some other peripheral devices and other peripheral interrupts. And what are those interrupts? We will see them in coming lectures in detail, but these are other peripheral interrupts, and these are input to these logical OR gate. And then the output of this logical OR gate is AND with this input, which is called PEIE, which is peripheral interrupt enable. So this input is something, if we place here, for example, I hope you know this thing. If we place here 0, what is going to happen? This input will have 0, and whatever the information, right, it is going to be, it is not going to come at the output, because if one of the input is 0 for the AND gate, right? So this is kind of, this area is kind of you can say enabling or disabling area of this specific or these specific interrupts, right? So this, if this gate is basically disabled, and how you can disable, you have to place here 0. So this gate is disabled, and the notification of these interrupts won't go to the main output, right? Furthermore, the output of this AND gate is going into this OR gate, right? This is the OR gate I'm talking about, right? And if you see what are other inputs, for example, timer 0, int 0 means interrupt 0, int 1 means interrupt 1, interrupt 2. So these are flags, interrupt flags of timer 0, interrupt 0, interrupt 1, and interrupt 2. So these are kind of segregated from these interrupts, and these are actually input of these input gate, right? So if you have even disable this specific gate, still these flags will actually go to this OR gate and will eventually arrive at this position, right? But what is this output? This output is basically the vector location. If you remember interrupt vector table, we have already discussed in the last video tutorial. So if you want that, this is kind of notification to microcontroller, which will let the microcontroller know that certain interrupt has arrived, right? So if we have one here, right, what is going to happen? Microcontroller will be interrupted. But what if we have placed a 0 here, right? This position, this input, if this position is basically 0, what is going to happen? The all the interrupts which may come from any of the reason we are going to disable. So this is complete interrupt chart or interrupt sequence which may come to this output, right? And so if any of these interrupts is coming, it will generate some output, but that one will become equal to 0, or that one will become equal to uh, uh, 0, with the help of what? With the help of this input. So this input is kind of very important. So this is called GIE, global interrupt enable. So this bit is very important, and if we have make it 0, that means no notification will eventually arrive to our system, right? And how you can make it disable, or how you can make it uh, enable, by putting here 1 or 0, right? So this is the key area where we have to focus, and where we have to actually be very careful by putting the value, right? So what is this GIE? Let's come to this topic. Okay, let's discuss what is this GIE. This GIE is basically bit of one of the register which we have already discussed. And what is that register? That register is interrupt control, right? So interrupt control is a register. We know that it is an 8-bit register. So there will be number of bits involved inside this register, but one of the bit, right? And that is basically the D7 bit of that register, right? You don't need to remember the location of this bit, but you need to know that it is the part of interrupt control, and this bit is basically what GIE. So what is it? Global interrupt enable. And if we want to disable complete notifications of from coming from any of the input or any of the interrupt, right? That could be timer 0, interrupt 1, interrupt 2, or timer 1, timer 2, transmitter, receiver, or any other peripheral interrupt. So if any of those notification uh, uh, we don't want let them to interrupt the microcontroller, what we have to do, we have to make this bit equal to what? Equal to 0. And what it will do, it will place here 0. And that means if any of the input coming from any of the interrupt, result will actually be 0, and microcontroller won't be interrupted. And how you can actually do this thing, we have already studied an instruction, bit clear file, right? Bit clear file. So this is, at the end we are clearing a bit of any file register. And what file register? Interrupt control. And the bit number is T7. If you want to place T7, you can place it, but we don't want to remember it. We just want to remember its name, that is global interrupt enable. So if you place this line in your code, that means you are not going to entertain any of the interrupt, and interrupt will be disabled. So how you can disable it, or how you can actually enable it? It's very easy. You have to just change the instruction bit set file interrupt control comma GIE, right? So this is how interrupt will be enabled, or globally interrupt will be enabled in your microcontroller. So now any of these interrupt, if they are properly configured. So what is the meaning of if they are properly configured? We will see in coming lecture, especially when we are going to learn how to enable a timer interrupt in next lecture. So we will see how you can actually configure an individual interrupt, but globally you can actually use these two instructions. Either you can actually enable, right, interrupt, or you can actually disable using this instruction, right? So that's it from this lecture. If you have any confusion or questions regarding this lecture, you can post them in comment section. Thank you so much for listening.